Hello and welcome back to another episode of You Want to Do What? Today I've got Jordan Schwarzenberger on, and he's the co-founder of Arcade Media. Hi, Jordan.
Hey mate, how's it going?
Good, you?
Very well, very well. Cannot complain. Cannot complain.
Jordan, should we jump straight in? Do you want to tell everyone a bit about what you do?
Of course. So my name's Jordan. I am 24 years old, and I am the co-founder of Arcade Media. So, currently, I manage the Sidemen with two others, my two amazing co-founders, Sam and Aaron. We've got a big old team now, probably around maybe 10 to 15 sort of people who work with us day to day, and then the extended team is about 120 to 150 people
Wow.
plus, with all the different projects and everything else. So yeah, our role essentially is to help the Sidemen, who are the biggest content creators in Europe, to build out their whole world around their brand, and ultimately to turn the Sidemen brand into a franchise and into an enterprise internationally that can live out and extend much longer than they can ultimately. So yeah, during the time I've been working with them now for a year, it's been amazing. It's been like it's such a ride of creativity and pace, and just amazing creative satisfaction for myself being a creative at heart. I think it's been the most fun year ever, just because we've been able to do so much so quickly without all the red tape and bureaucracy that often comes with bigger companies and corporations. So it's been brilliant. We've launched 3 projects so far with them. Side Plus being the membership club, which is essentially a premium membership offering for fans who ultimately want more. So it's more content, more access to the boys, giveaways, and so on. That's doing really well. Sides, which is the fried chicken restaurant. Again, we never thought I'd be leading on a fried chicken brand, but there you go. Which we're doing with Hero Brands, who run Joe Madonna Kebab and Island Poke and a bunch of other amazing brands. So working with them, and it's now up to I think 41 sites in the UK we counted today,
Wow.
and another 8 in the UAE, and we're launching in the US this month, and Norway and other countries around the world as well. So incredible growth on that brand, and so much fun to work on a food brand that is completely different to anything I've ever done before. But thankfully, because of the Hero team, it makes it easy, really, because they're so brilliant. And then XX Vodka, which is the vodka brand. So the boys always had a vision of going into a club and being able to order their own vodka. And so hopefully we've managed to make that happen. I mean, when the Magnums come out, then we will. We've definitely made that happen.
Very cool.
But yeah, 5 times distilled, made in the UK. I don't drink anymore. I stopped drinking at the beginning of 2018. So I've never actually tried it. But apparently, as everyone says, it's amazing. And with the quality of it, the process has been in a really meticulous way worked through, again with Hero. So they've done an amazing job. People love the product and it's selling really well. So yeah, we've got those 3 projects out already. We've been working, as you can imagine, on a number of new things that again, and this is always the thread for me, that help to create a greater access for as many fans as possible to the boys, in whatever way that means. I think that's kind of if there's one sort of mission for us as management, is obviously to help the boys to be able to have more freedom and to step off, whilst building. I think they've got a limited amount of time, which is getting less and less with the amount of content they're creating, both for the Sidemen and personally. So our job is to essentially build the world around them, which means they don't have to ultimately spend more and more time doing more and more stuff, but their brand can still build and evolve, and that fans and the community that they've been spending the last 10 years building can have as many access points to them, and to the things which they love them for, as possible. So that's really our aim.
I mean, I think you have an incredibly enviable job. I think loads of people will be listening to this and thinking that's got to be one of the best jobs going. You're working with content creators like Sidemen. I mean, everybody knows them. Their content is constantly on any feed I go on any social media, they're popping up. So it must just be incredible. But people will be listening to this because they want to go into a similar kind of field, or they want to work in influencing or social media or something like that. Let's talk about how this all started for you, because obviously you're doing this now, and we'll go more into depth about what you do now, but I'm interested in how you actually got into this.
Of course. So yes, I started off when I was, well, I guess during my time at school, I'd always sort of built brands and loved sort of creating things which had logos and felt like proper things. It was always, I don't know, you know, the thing of once it's in a deck, it's real. Once it's got a logo, it's real. Like there's something about that, right? Like giving things an identity, and I always loved doing that. I had a clothing brand when I was like 15, 16 called Black Mountain Clothing. I had a film magazine called Lost VHS, where we would review, me and a few friends would review films, go to screenings and so on. That was really fun. Had used to make music and put out a mixtape thing and that. So I've just done quite a few bits when I was at school, and then got to the end of my school time, and it was uni time, obviously, where everyone was having to apply for uni and look at what we do next. And I always had an instinct that uni wasn't the one for me, and I just had a sense that it was going to be a waste of time. I was proven correct, but before I was proven correct, I was going through that process. But just before I'd done all my personal statements, done all my applications, had gotten offers into King's and a bunch of others. King's was my first choice to study a degree called digital culture. But before I went, I thought, okay, let me just see if there's anything else I can do. So a friend of mine called Noah, he had a bunch of email addresses from a work experience period he did with Vice back in year 10. And so I was like, no, can I just have all those emails, please? This is why we're supposed to be doing politics revision. He was like, yeah, man, take the thread. So he forwarded it on to me. I had a bunch of emails, and I sent an email out to 20 people there, just saying, hi, this is me. This is all the stuff I've done. I love what you guys do. Can I come in for a coffee and a chat? Because Vice was, of all the companies I could think of, Vice was one which I thought, okay, they are cool. They do good stuff. Like that was the adage of 2015, probably not so much anymore, but Vice is cool. That was always the thing. And you know, they made amazing documentaries. It's very creative business, aesthetically stunning. And I just thought that's a vibe. I didn't know what they really did or how the business worked, but I thought it was attractive to some degree creatively for me, quite a high degree. So yeah, I got in touch. About 2 people got back to me. It's always the way, and I say this to everybody, just 100 emails, you'll get 2 replies. Those 2 replies will be enough. It's always the way. And so yeah, I did that, went in to meet a girl called Amelia Abraham, who was one of the editors there at the time. Had a chat with her. She then referred me to Ian Richardson, who ran the agency called Virtue. And I spoke to Ian. He was like, yeah, look, like, love sounds of you and what you do and everything else. Would you like to come in for work experience? So I said, yeah, great, would love to. Amazing. So I did. I went to Glastonbury that weekend, I think, came back. I was 18. I turned 18 while I was at Glastonbury, got back. I was 18 years old. I started Advice doing work experience there. Was there for that whole summer. And then got to the point where I then had to go to uni, and I was like, oh, okay, this isn't great. I would love to stay and do this. So I did every Friday at Vice whilst the rest of the week was at uni at King's doing digital culture. And I always say, like, that contrast of studying digital culture for 4 days a week and then working in digital culture at Vice every Friday was a really stunning and startling, I think, contrast, because the difference was obviously huge.
That's a great point, because we always talk about this, especially with our guests that work within influencing the social media.
Yeah,
there are loads of degrees out there now which you can go and study. You know, I think there's one that specializes in Instagram, ridiculous, but they're so out of date by the time you complete them that it's utterly pointless, in my opinion. I don't know if you agree.
So it's one topic that I'm quite harsh on, very harsh on, and probably too harsh on at times, is university, just because I mean, we can get into that, but I think the whole institutions for this space, and I'll focus my generalization and my quite heated generalization onto this space, because there's the one space I can have some level of credibility talking about, but I think it's an absolute waste of time in every capacity. Anyway, to jump into my experience of that waste of time, I was being there for 4 days a week and then going to work at Vice on the Friday, and that difference was just insane. The degree was terribly, as you say, out of date. Not even out of date, it didn't even cover relevant topics. It was run by people, nice enough people, but there was nothing there really in terms of anything relevant to the space in the real world, and it was really quite shocking. And I remember just being like, what is this? And thankfully, I love working at Vice every Friday, and the associate creative director and creative director took me aside when we were at the Christmas party, and we were talking, and they said, look, we'd love to offer you a job if you wanted to come. Don't want your parents to get annoyed at us if we get you to drop out of uni, but we'd love to have you. So, because I was telling them how much I hated it, and they said, and then we all agreed, yeah, let's do it. So I went home, told my parents. They were really supportive, and that was just before Christmas. And then I dropped out literally that Saturday. The party was on the Friday. I sent the email that I was leaving on the Saturday morning at 9 a.m. as quick as I could, and then after Christmas I didn't go back. So I started there as a junior creative, and I think it was the youngest junior creative there, I think ever, I think I was like 18 at the time still. And it was amazing. Loved it. But then 3 months later, Ian, who is now a good friend of mine, incredibly inspiring individual, ran Vice's agency, Virtue, as well as a bunch of other places. And he said to me, look, I've got the opportunity to go to Lab Bible to build their agency. Do you want to come with me? So I said, yeah, why not? Like, let's do it. So I went with him. After 3 months there as a full-time junior creative, and started as a creative strategist at Lab Bible, with him building the agency. We were there for a year and a half before and it was amazing. Obviously Lab was crazy. This was a time when it was going through its transitional, I'd say it's late teen years. So it was like growing up a little bit, and it was just shedding away the bum day Mondays and, all that trash, which was, quite high up on the agenda before we came. And it realized, I think the leadership there knew they couldn't sustain that, and it wasn't right. It wasn't good. So they had to get rid of it, bring in people who could help it grow up. And, it did. And ultimately, though, regardless of the content, which wasn't great, the scale was absolutely huge. And it was the biggest platform in the UK by a country mile in terms of views, engagement, reach, etc. So it was really exciting. Went there to sort of, help set up the agency with Ian, but also help the content and the channels and so on. And made amazing friends there, real dream team of people, loved every minute of it. But I got to the point at the end of that where I thought, you know what? I've been now doing this for a few years. I was 19, a few years, literally 19 years. It felt like a lifetime, but I was like 19. I was like, let me set up my own company to go out into the world and help brands, help brands to sort of connect with Gen Z, which was the thing that I was doing at the time. So I did that, set up Roundabout, which was the first sort of Gen Z agency, with a couple of apprentices who had come to work with me at the time at LAD, who I brought into that team, Michael and Stefan, who are also good friends of mine now. And we did that for about 6-7 months before we had a bunch of clients. James Grant, talent management company, was one of those clients. It was amazing getting to work with them through Roundabout, helping Frank Lampard, Reggie Yates, Rylan, a bunch of other amazing clients, help them to, future-proof their strategies and build their brands. But it got to the end of the year, this was 2017, and Mary, who was the MD of entertainment at the time, who had brought me in, we got on really well, and she's, again, incredibly inspiring mentor of mine now, and I got lucky enough to work with her and for her for a number of years. And she was like, look, we'd love you to join us, like as much time as you can give. And I thought about it, spoke to Michael and Stefan, and they got to the point where they were like, you know what, this is amazing, but we're happy to go and do our own thing for a period of time as well. We've all been given this amazing, I guess, speed bump into the industry, and we were able to kind of just move forward at a real pace. And so they went off to do their own thing at various different companies. And I joined YMU as the chief creative officer at 20 years old in the beginning of 2018, which was mad. And I was there like, hang on a minute, this is, obviously amazing responsibility, huge company, but also like, an amazing opportunity to work with the biggest talent in the world, which was the missing piece for me. I obviously worked at publishers and editorial platforms, but this was talent. And I realized at that point that talent were the missing key, because people buy people, they don't buy brands or publishers. And although Lab Bible can scale to whatever number, there'll never be that connection on a real personal level, because ultimately it's a faceless brand. Same with any publisher, right? Or any platform. It's the people, it's the faces, it's the personalities that drive the scale and drive the connection. And so that's working in a talent management company with hundreds of these individuals who were the biggest in the country, and some of the biggest in the world, was really exciting. So joined them, was there for 4 years, amazing time, loved it. And learned so much. I almost look at it as my university experience, really, from a business perspective. It was like studying a business degree and a master's and everything else all in one, right? That's how you learn it, through doing it. And fortunately, I was in a position where I was given that trust and responsibility and that closeness to the top, where I was able to really learn it, and get stuck into things like the sale when we sold to Trilantic for 300 million or however much it was. That being part of that process as a 20-year-old or 21-year-old, and learning actually how you sell a company, how you value a company, what the process of courting venture capitalists, like all of that stuff. It was amazing, absolutely incredible experience. But it got to the point where, sorry, it's very long, I do apologize. It got to the point where we obviously COVID hit. The company, naturally, as everyone did, lost a lot of its business. because a lot of the stock was in live that we were sort of trading or strategically working through. And it was hard. And the company went through a real overdrive period where everyone was obviously working, as I'm sure so many people I know had this experience, like 20, 30 times harder than ever before, never working harder to try and survive, but also at the same time not being able to really execute that much effectively because of the limitations. So you're working really, really hard on things that ultimately wouldn't come to fruition, but everyone was just trying because they were panicking, right? And everyone's anxiety was coming through, and it was just, as it was for everybody, a really difficult time. So it was enough of a seed for me. My wife and I just had our first baby as well back in beginning of 2020, and it was just tough to go from obviously having a baby and lockdown, everything else, to then being in this real strenuous environment from a work perspective, where it just gave me the seed where I thought, you know what, if something else was able to come up that was maybe more, I could be more in control of, then I'd look at it. And thankfully and providentially it did. And it got to the point where by the end of that year, a friend of mine, Aaron, who had worked with me in business management, he had met Sam. Me and him got on really well when he was at YMU. He'd left and managed some TikTok creators. He met Sam, who obviously is the YouTuber accountant, obviously, but he's a YouTuber accountant. He looks after everybody in the space. He's incredibly prolific and successful. And we all caught up, met, and thought, you know what, there's a real opportunity to speak to the Sidemen boys, given that they'd been killing it from a content perspective, huge growth, huge numbers, but the rest of their world hadn't grown, I think, at the same pace, and hadn't really had the energy and I guess attention on the rest of their world. What else can they do? So we met with them, said, look, guys, you can do this. You guys are killing it on the content side, but look at the rest of the things that you can do. There was all the stuff we were looking at YMU around IP and building your own brands and everything else. Definitely the future. And so they said, yeah, let's do it. Let's go for it. So I handed my notice. We all started beginning of April last year, and it's been a pretty mad year since. Wow,
what a journey, what a career! What a career!
Man, it's been mad. I apologize. That was very long and rambling, but I hope it was somewhat interesting.
No, definitely. I mean, that's incredible. I'm sure you get told this all the time, but 24 and you've done all that. That's lifetime's worth experience. And I think that, correct me if you think I'm wrong, but this has only come about because of the world of social media and influencers, and this world sort of slowly maturing. And now, like, careers like you've just explained are now possible, right?
100%. I think, I was fortunate enough to be at companies that were sort of pushing, like with Vice and with Lab, but especially I think at Lab Bible, which was really on the cutting edge of that. I mean, at the time, that sort of Facebook boom, when brands and businesses were being launched from that sort of Facebook economy, really, when it came to reach and views and branded content and everything else. And obviously my time at Vice before then, who again were pioneering the space. So I was able to be in environments which were really pushing, I guess, the space forward. And so, I think it allowed me to bring not so much my experience in terms of a career, but my experience culturally. That was the main thing, and that was always the value that I guess I was fortunate enough to recognize, which was that being 18, 19, 20, that was the value, that I was able to help these platforms, these brands connect with the audience who are engaging on these platforms. And I think that's the piece where people like myself and so many others now, and this is more the case today than ever before, I think, that young people who may not maybe value themselves in terms of their experience, they have a value because of who they are and who they are in this moment in time, in this cultural moment, where through their own understanding and experience of content, of pop culture, which they consume on a personal level, they can add a lot of value to brands and to platforms and publishers, which, thankfully, Vice and Lad and Ian really on both counts gave me a real, he believed in me enough to bring him with him on that journey and to help be that, I guess, that future-proofing agent. And that was always the thing as well, which when I went over to start Roundabout, that was the drive. It was to help future-proof brands for Gen Z, which all of us young people who have, experience being young in this time and engage with culture, we know that better than anybody who's older and disconnected. And even me, I'm old now, right? Like in the sense, not necessarily from age, but in terms of, I've got 2 babies and I'm married and everything else. I don't even engage with culture in the same way that I did when I was 18, 19, right? So I think, for us, it's like working with people who are younger, who are on that cutting edge. That's always the key, and knowing that you're not, which I think at both companies, they had that instinct, which is why I think they had such success. I mean, Lab Bible, for example, Kit and Ira, who are like the most, there needs to be a film made about these boys, but we, when I was like 14, when they were 14, sorry, they came to be apprentices at Lab Bible. And these guys were just like these two like kids basically, right? Who were these social media geniuses. They were able to build pages from nothing, and blow them up into these massive, 100K, 200K, a million follower pages in no time. They were just unreal. And obviously, and then it turned out, that they were there for a period of time. And then, I worked very closely with them as well for a period. We got on really well. They're brilliant when they were 14, 15, 16. But then, I then left. And they went off to set up like Puberty and Memes Are, and some of the biggest meme pages in the world. Puberty's like, everyone follows Puberty, right? It's like what, 20 million, 11 million, 12 million on Instagram. Memes Are as well, absolutely huge. And they have a whole brand of business around them. But their vantage point for Lab Bible and now for themselves is that they understand culture and the way that culture moves online better than anybody, because they've grown up on it. They've pushed the space forward, but ultimately they've been consuming it nonstop since they were kids. So I think, it's a good lesson. And I think, example, both my story and theirs, that, being young has tremendous benefit in this space, if you can leverage it.
Yeah. I mean, let's break your career down a little bit from working with online publishers, and then we'll also talk about managing creatives. But working for online publishers, if somebody's listening to this and they're like, do you know what, I'd love to go into an online publisher, what kind of things could they be working on apart from, like you said, immersing themselves within culture to be attractive to these kind of employers?
Yeah, so I think it's a good question. I think there's, one thing that I struggled with on a personal level before, not struggled with, but I didn't know, and no one does. You don't know what the job even is, right? You don't know how a publisher operates or works. I think learning a bit about the structure, speaking to people, doing a lot of outreach on LinkedIn, again, the 100 messages, get 2 replies, like trying to learn a bit about the structure in the space, whether it's the agency side and the in-house agency model, which is becoming increasingly popular, or whether it's on the more editorial side and the content itself, producing, editing, creating. I think the other thing that is you cannot put a price on is the experience of just making content, and just getting out there and creating something, whether it's awful, like no one cares. Like ultimately the experience you'll get through learning how to film, edit, publish, write captions, like that's the real gold, I think, from an experience perspective. And everyone has that in their locker, right? If you have a phone, you can create TikToks, or you can create an Instagram page or whatever it might be. I mean, even for myself, I think that was thinking back to it when I was 14, whatever. I used to like make music, and I put out like a mixtape when I was like 14, and like it had like maybe 15 tracks or something. It was all right. Like I was at school obviously, but one of the things that I had to do was produce an album like cover and make a campaign on social, and even in my little way to my friends on Facebook. Like that experience I got just from mapping a rollout and all of that was invaluable actually, because and even with the clothing company, the same thing, producing a launch video, getting that out on social, like planning drops, all of that stuff was again invaluable, because it gave me the hands-on experience of how to roll things out and make things happen online. And ultimately, even if it wasn't great, the actual skill set that was needed to execute it and to do it is purely transferable onto these publishers and onto the world that I ended up going into. So I would say that's one thing that anybody can do, is to start, if you're interested in publishing, start publishing ultimately, but publish for yourself, and just get out there with something, something that's tangible. I say this to people, if they want to be a presenter, okay, start a podcast, start making content. Look at someone like Amunya Chihuahua, who, is or Amelia Demodaba, 2 people who I was fortunate enough to work with very closely at YMU, and both when they were early in their journey, and both of them are testaments purely to starting and just getting on with it. Munya, people wouldn't necessarily know just how many skits he has made when no one was looking, and how many videos the guy churned out when he was on 10K followers, 5K followers, skits of the same level and quality, obviously more finesse now, but they were brilliant. But actually he just got on with it, and he learned to publish, he learned to execute and to create. And Amelia is a similar example with Chicken Shop Day. That show went on 4 years. She's been doing that since maybe 2014, 15. So I think it's those are 2 examples. And even with the publishers that are killing it today, any of these pages, they all have to start off with 0 followers, right? 0 subscribers. So I think if you're an individual who wants to work in this space, start off with nothing and just get going in whatever capacity it is, because that'll be the case study, that'll be the CV that is attractive.
Yes. I love talking to people like you, because that is exactly what I've been banging on this podcast about, especially if you want to work in this space, because like you say, like if you hand someone a CV, I went to university and I studied social media. Cool. So did thousands of other people. But if you hand in, you say, follow these links, check out this, here's my content, this is what I've made, you're like 1,000 times more employable, right?
100%. I think it's funny, right? And you got to feel for people, and I have a lot of friends who went through this experience of thinking that uni was, and obviously maybe touch on the uni thing, but thinking that uni was the value point for them when it comes to getting employed, and they realize that no one wants to hire them because they've never done anything practical, but they think the uni was practical, and you have to remind them, no, uni's not practical, it's entirely theoretical and abstract. Really, it has the experience you get at uni is, for, again, big generalization, so obviously take it for what it is, but for so many people who go to university in the creative side or in the social side or anything else, you're not doing anything tangible, practical that is applicable really to the space and to the real world. So I think, exactly as you're saying, the best thing you could do is to start a podcast, is to start creating content, is to show all the skills that you're saying through actual application in the real world. And also, I think, for me anyway, when you see people who have done stuff themselves, who've done things off their own bat, it's a great demonstration of their attitude more than anything, that they're willing to start, they're willing to take a risk, to be exposed to their friends, to to have to take that heat if things aren't great, but the confidence and the determination to keep something going or to start something speaks volumes. It speaks much more than any CV with any courses or degrees could ever.
I think we talk about this and we say, look, just start something, just do whatever it is, just start it. But people will listen to this and think, yeah, no, I'll start it, and they won't do anything. So if you're one of the 10% or 5% that actually do take action and start something, you'll just shoot way above the competition. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to necessarily do something with your face on camera. It could be a meme page, it could be whatever. But if you just start something, that's the key. And like you just explained, like Amelia with Chicken Date, she just started it. Like all these things happen just because people start.
Exactly. And I think it's what separates people. And it's not, it's actually, when you think about it, it's not that the separation between people who really smash it and fly and people who don't is really not that much. Really, it's about, and it's not so much in terms of talent. I think that's the other thing people don't always recognize. It's not so much about skill sets and talent as much as it is around consistency and starting. Those are the two things. It's the first step, and then keeping that going, whatever it is. And we've seen so many creators out there who make, the content isn't always the best, but ultimately they grow a following, they create a career for themselves, they succeed in whatever capacity because they just started, and they are continuing and they are not stopping. So I think it's a really it's a hugely important thing for people to recognize that. And I think people are going with the crisis at the minute when it comes to jobs, when it comes to inflation, when it comes to money, people are going to be in more of a need than ever for ways to break, I guess, the ceiling, which especially university places in terms of time, debt, etc. And I think, maybe we'll see a boom of people who have nowhere else to turn other than to start creating because they want a way out of whatever job or whatever situation they might be in. And actually, I think that's where, even lockdown was a good example of that. The amount of amazing creatives, creators, platforms, brands that blew up out of that challenging time when people, I think, were quite desperate to do something productive and expressive and ultimately freeing, because they felt trapped and they felt confined, whether it was at work, at home, etc. So it was interesting to see just that creative boom that came from that period of time. And I think it'll be interesting to see going forwards how that attitude continues, because I think a lot of people, there were so many people moving jobs and thinking a bit differently. That reflective moment that everybody, or many people went through, was a real turning point for creativity, especially online. I think because that was the main channel, the main output, place that everyone could access. So yeah, we'll see. But I think as you're saying, it was something that Gary Vaynerchuk always used to say back in 2017 when I was doing Roundabout, I was daily vlogging and doing all of that. And it was this thing around one is better than zero, one follower is better than none, and if you've got one, that's something, right? So just start.
And then talking about what you're doing now and talent management with Arcade Media. So what I want to know is, you mentioned you've got some full-time employees. There's also a huge team behind the Sidemen, But when you're looking to expand the team or you're looking to get someone in, what kind of skill sets does somebody need to work in the talent management side?
For sure. So I think our model is probably a bit different because we're not really a talent management company. Like we are, but we're not. I think, we manage talent, but our focus day to day is the creative execution on the projects and on the brands, more than it is traditional talent management, because the boys aren't traditional, right? They do things differently. They are creating their own content. They're not on TV, right? They're not doing jobs and gigs in the same way that you would if you were, let's say a traditional entertainer, quote unquote, in the UK. So I think what they need, and what we offer them and what we do with them is to build the sort of corporate structure around their world, and to help them to creatively execute and to, increase efficiency, to optimize their processes, their workflows, to almost project manage and to sculpt the structure of their world. That's kind of the key. So, when it comes to things like their brands, is how do we bring in people who can work on the projects in various creative roles and capacities. We're helping them on their sort of current content structure, for example, at the minute. How do we bring in creative producers, channel managers, editors? And I think the biggest thing when we sift through obviously tons of CVs and applications, and there's definitely no shortage of people who want to work with them. But the thing that is the differing point, I would say, is people who really get the YouTube scene, who know it, who are confident in expressing their knowledge of it, and who can demonstrate that they just get it. Because YouTube's one of those things that is really unique, right? In the way it works, the way it operates, the way it comes together. You cannot replicate. You have to know it, like TikTok or any of these platforms, but YouTube especially. You have to know things like thumbnails, like titles, like how these things can really come together, and ultimately where success lies, which isn't in just the substance of the video, obviously to a large extent, but it's a lot of it is in the framing, is in the title, in the optimization, and all of that. So the people who, I think, for the creative roles, they have to really understand how the space works and ultimately be a fan of the space. And I think be a fan of the boys. I think actually the people who really shine are those who watch their content, who know what a good video is. They know what a bad video is. They know what what success looks like. They know what non-success looks like as a fan, so they can really help translate that for them. So I think that for me is a really key one: being a fan of them, being a fan of their world, knowing the products, knowing Side Plus, knowing Vodka, knowing Sides, like really engaging with it. But then also knowing, what good looks like for a fan, because ultimately, right, if you were a brand, if you were Pepsi, for example, or whoever, you'd want your marketing team to be a fan of the product, right? You'd want them to know what it's like to buy Pepsi, and to what good collabs look like, what bad collabs look like, what nice packaging is versus bad, and so on. I think the same applies. If the Sidemen treat it as a brand and as a media brand, like a Disney or like a whatever, you need to treat it in the same way that you would any of these companies, and that is to ultimately hire people who are hyper engagers with the product. And that, I think, is definitely the differing point.
I think what really interests me about what you're doing as well is the fact that you're not just focusing on the creative, you're also focusing on building the business and the processes behind it. And that's really interesting, because I think I've not seen that before. Like, I don't really know the space particularly well. I know about online publishers, but I think what you're doing is super interesting, because you're actually, like you said, you're taking these guys' brands and making it last longer than they are by building businesses behind it. So if somebody's listening to thinking, oh, actually, I'd quite like to get into that side, like helping to build the businesses, is that like brand partnerships, things like that? Is that those kind of skill sets? Is that what you do as well?
I think, I think the brand partnership side is one part, but I think it is for them, and they are an exception because of their scale. I think it's definitely an exception. In that, I think they do brand partnerships here and there, but the focus is on them building their own brands. Right, they're at a point where they've done a lot of partnerships over the years, and although of course brand partnerships are great and they help provide obviously an income stream and help to scale what they're doing, at the same time it's a drop in the ocean ultimately compared to their own brands and the potential future equity and the future value in these things, obviously, right? That's partly why we do them, of course. So I think on that side of things, from a somebody who might want to work in this space, I think it's about it's finding people who are executors more than anything, because I think with brand partnerships, obviously that's the more negotiation piece. It's about being able to work with partners and to manage fees and manage the assets and the activation, fine. But I think on the projects, on the side pluses, on the sides, on the XX, and on all the other things that we might look to do in the future, the skill set's more around being able to creatively execute. So it's about being able to, market things, to be able to, produce rollout plans, produce social plans, create assets, brief designers, have a vision creatively, but also on the business side, help with optimization, strategy, how are we, tracking in certain markets, how are we able to enter new markets? Like, it's all of that. I mean, there's literally an endless list of skill sets. So I think it's people, but I think above all, it's people who are passionate about business and about brands. And if you're passionate about business and about brands, then, it's the perfect starting point to be able to engage. And I think it is different. That's the piece, right? Normally management is about brand partnerships and about the more sort of, I guess, the traditional commercial avenues, merch, brand partnerships and so on. But with what we're trying to do, it's about building these businesses which are individually, an entire entity in their own right, with their entire team need and their entire, completely different marketing strategy, brand strategy, and so on. So I think having the passion is the first thing, and then it's about finding where you can really add value and execute creatively on whatever project it might be.
I love that. I think that's such an interesting angle to come at it from. And I really appreciate your time today, Jordan. I think it's been fascinating hearing all about your career, and it's incredible what you've achieved already. And thank you for your advice to everyone listening. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Mate, no, thank you. And as I always say as well, if anybody ever wants to, reach out, get some advice, like email, whatever, I'm always more than happy. Obviously time pending to speak to people and to support as many people as I possibly can. So yeah, my email is jordan.rk.media. Like, feel free to hit me up, and anything I can do, just, anybody feel free to give me a shout.
Thank you. And one last question. I think I know the answer to this, but would you still go into this knowing everything you know now?
Yes, 100%, 100%.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jordan.
Nice one, man. Thank you.